Book 1, Canto 8. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 1. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. Canto 8. Fair virgin to redeem her dear brings Arthur to the fight, who slays the giant, wounds the beast, and strips Duessa quite. Ay me, how many perils do unfold the righteous man, to make him daily fall, were not that heavenly grace doth him uphold, and steadfast truth acquite him out of all. Her love is firm, her care continual, so oft as he through his own foolish pride or weakness is to sinful bands made thrall. Else should this Red Cross Knight in bands have died, for whose deliverance she this prince doth thither guide. They sadly travailed thus, until they came nigh unto a castle builded strong and high. Then cried the dwarf, Lo, yonder is the same, in which my lord, my liege, doth luckless lie, thrall to that giant's hateful tyranny. Therefore, dear sir, your mighty powers assay. The noble knight alighted by and by from lofty steed, and bade the lady stay, to see what end of fight should him befall that day. So with the squire, the admirer of his might, he marched forth towards that castle wall, whose gates he found fast shut, nor living wight to ward the same, nor answer comers' call. Then took that squire an horn of bugle small, which hung adown his side in twisted gold, and tassels gay. Wide wonders over all of that same horn's great virtue weren told, which had approved been in uses manifold. Was never wight that heard that shrilling sound, but trembling fear did feel in every vein. 3 miles it might be easy heard around, and echoes 3 answered itself again. No false enchantment, nor deceitful train might once abide the terror of that blast, but presently was void and wholly vain. No gate so strong, no lock so firm and fast, but with that pursing noise flew open quite, or brast. The same before the giant's gate he blew, that all the castle quaked from the ground, and every door of free will open flew. The giant self dismayed with that sound, where he with his Duessa dalliance found, in hast came rushing forth from inner bower, with staring countenance stern, as one astound, and staggering steps, to weet what sudden stowre had wrought that horror strange, and dared his dreaded powre. And after him the proud Duessa came, high mounted on her many-headed beast, and every head with fiery tongue did flame, and every head was crowned on his creast, and bloody mouthed with late cruel feast, that when the knight beheld, his mighty shield upon his manly arm he soon addrest, and at him fiercely flew, with courage filled, and eager greediness through every member thrilled. Therewith the giant buckled him to fight, inflamed with scornful wrath and high disdain, and lifting up his dreadful club on hight, all armed with ragged snubs and knotted grain, him thought at first encounter to have slain. But wise and wary was that noble peer, and lightly leaping from so monstrous main, did fair avoid the violence him near. It booted nought to think such thunderbolts to bear. Nor shame he thought to shun so hideous might. The idle stroke, enforcing furious way, missed the mark of his misaimed sight, did fall to ground, and with his heavy sway, so deeply dinted in the drunken clay, that 3 yards deep a furrow up did throw. The sad earth wounded with so sore assay, did groan full grievous underneath the blow, and trembling with strange fear, did like an earthquake show. As when almighty Jove in wrathful mood, to wreak the guilt of mortal sinnes is bent, hurls forth his thundering dart with deadly food, enrolled in flames, and smouldering dreariment, through riven clouds and molten firmament, the fierce 3-forked engine making way, both lofty towers and highest trees hath rent, and all that might his angry passage stay, and shooting in the earth, casts up a mount of clay. His boisterous club so buried in the ground, he could not rearen up again so light, but that the knight him at advantage found, And whiles he ftrove his comrade club to quite Out of the earth, with blade all burning bright, He fmote off his left arme, which like a block Did fall to ground, depriv'd of native might. Large ftreames of blood out of the trunkard stocke Forth gufht, like frefh waters ftreame from riven rock. Difmayd with fo defperate deadly wound, And eke impatient of unwonted paine, He loudly brayed with beaftly yelling found, That all the fields rebellowed againe, As great a noyfe, as when in Cimbrian plaine An herd of bulls, whom kindly rage doth fting, Do for the milky mothers want complaine, And fill the fields with troublous bellowing. The neighbour woods around with hollow murmur ring. And when his deare Duessa heard, and faw the evill found, That daungerd her eftate, unto his fide She haftily did draw her dreadfull beaft, Who fwollen with blood of late came ramping forth With proud prefumptuous gait, and threatned all his heads like flaming brands. But him the Squire made quickly to retrate, Encountering fierce with fingle fword in hand, And twixt him and his Lord did like a bulwarke stand. The proud Duessa, full of wrathfull fpight And fierce difdaine, to be affronted fo, Enforced her purple breaft with all her might, That ftopt out of the way to overthrow, Scorning the let of fo unequall foe. But nethermore would that couragious fwaine To her yield paffage, gainft his Lord to go, But with outragious ftrokes did him reftraine, And with his body barr'd the way atwixt them twaine. Then tooke the angry witch her golden cup, Which ftill fhe bore, replete with magique arts. Death and defpaire did many thereof fup, And fecret poyfon through their inner parts, Th'eternal bale of heavy wounded harts. Which after charmes and fome enchantments faid, She lightly fprinckled on his weaker parts. Therewith his fturdy courage foone was quayd, And all his fences were with fudden dread difmayd. So downe he fell before the cruel beaft, Who on his necke his bloody clawes did feize, That life nigh crufht out of his panting breaft. No powre had he to ftirre, nor will to rize, That when the carefull Knight gan well avize, He lightly left the foe, with whom he fought, And to the beaft gan turne his enterprize. For wondrous anguifh in his heart it wrought, To see his loved Squire into fuch thraldom brought. And high advancing, his bloodthirsty blade Ftroke one of thofe deformed heads fo fore, That of his puissance proud enfample made, His monftrous fculpe down to his teeth it tore, And that misformed fhape misfhaped more. A fea of blood gufht from the gaping wound, That her gay garments ftained with filthy gore, And overflowed all the field around, That overfhoes in blood he waded on the ground. Thereat he roar'd for exceeding paine, That to have heard great horror would have bred, And fcourging the empty aire with his long traine, Through great impatience of his grieved head, His gorgeous rider from her lofty ftead Would have caft downe, and trod in dirty mire, Had not the Gyant foone her fuccored, Who all enraged with fmart and frantique ire, Came hurtling in full fierce, and forced the Knight retire. The force, which wont in two to be difperft, In one alone left hand he now unites, Which is through rage more ftrong then both were erft, With which his hideous club aloft he dights, And at his foe with furious rigour fmites, That ftrongeft oake might feeme to overthrow. The ftroke upon his fhield fo heavy lights, That to the ground it doubleth him full low. What mortall wight could ever beare fo monftrous blow? And in his fall his fhield, that covered was, Did loose his vaile by chance, and open flew The light whereof, that heavens light did pas, Such blazing brightnefle to the aire threw, That eye mote not the fame endure to view. Which when the Gyant fpide with ftaring eye, He downe let fall his arme, and foft withdrew His weapon huge, that heaved was on high, For to have flaine the man, that on the ground did lie. And eke the fruitfull headed beaft, amazed At flashing beames of that funfhiny fhield, Became ftarke blind, and all his fences dazed, That downe he tumbled on the dirty field, And feemed himfelfe as conquered to yield. Whom when his Maiftris proud perceived to fall, Whilft yet his feeble feet for faintnefle reeled, Unto the Gyant loudly fhe gan call, O help, Orgoglio, help, or else we perifh all. At her fo piteous cry was much amoved our champion ftout, And for to ayd his friend, againe his wonted angry weapon proved. But all in vaine, for he has read his end In that bright fhield, and all their forces fpend in themfelves in vaine. For fince that glauncing fight he hath no powre To hurt nor to defend. as where the Almighty's lightning bronze does light, it dims the dazen iron, and daunts the senses quite. Whom when the Prince to battell new addrest, and threatning high his dreadful stroke did see, his sparkling blade about his head he blest, and smote off quite his right leg by the knee, that down he tumbled, as an aged tree high growing on the top of rocky clift, whose heartstrings with keen steel nigh hewen be, that mighty trunk half rent with ragged rift, doth roll adown the rocks, and fall with fearful drift. Or as a castle, reared high and round by subtle engines and malicious sleight, is undermined from the lowest ground, and her foundation forced and feebled quite, at last down falls, and with her heaped height her hasty ruin does more heavy make, and yields itself unto the victors might. Such was this giants fall, that seemed to shake the steadfast globe of earth, as it for feare did quake. The Knight then lightly leaping to the prey, with mortal steele him smote again so sore, that headless his unwieldly body lay, and wallowed in his own foule bloody gore, which flowed from his wounds in wondrous store. But soon as breath out of his breast did passe, that huge great body, which the giant bore, was vanish'd quite, and of that monstrous masse was nothing left, but like an empty bladder was. Whose grievous fall, when false Duessa spide, her golden cup she cast unto the ground, and crowned mitre rudely threw aside. Such piercing griefe her stubborn heart did wound, that she could not endure that dolefull stound, but leaving all behind her, fled away. The light-foot squire her quickly turned around, and by hard meanes enforcing her to stay, so brought unto his lord, as his deserved prey. The royal virgin, which beheld from far in pensive plight and sad perplexity the whole atchievement of this doubtful warre, came running fast to greet his victory, with sober gladness and mild modesty, and with sweet joyous cheare him thus bespake: Faire branch of noblesse, flowre of chevalry, that with your worth the world amazed make, how shall I quite the paines ye suffer for my sake? And you fresh bud of virtue springing fast, whom these sad eyes saw nigh unto deaths door, what hath poor virgin for such perill past wherewith you to reward? Accept therefore my simple self and service evermore, and he that high does sit, and all things see, with equal eyes their merits to restore. Behold what ye this day have done for me, and what I cannot quite requite with usury. But sith the heavens and your faire handling have made you maister of the field this day, your fortune maister eke with governing, and well begun end all so well, I pray. Nor let that wicked woman scape away, for she it is that did my lord bethrall, my dearest lord, and deep in dungeon lay, where he his better days hath wasted all. O hear, how piteous he to you for aid doth call. Forthwith he gave in charge unto his squire that scarlet whore to keepen carefully, whilst he himself with greedy great desire into the castle entred forcibly, where living creature none he did espy. Then gan he loudly through the house to call, but no man cared to answer to his cry. There reigned a solemn silence over all, nor voice was heard, nor wight was seen in bower or hall. At last with creeping crooked pace forth came an old man, with beard as white as snow, that on a staffe his feeble steps did frame, and guide his weary gait both to and fro. For his eyesight him failed long ago, and on his arm a bunch of keys he bore, the which unused rust did overgrow. Those were the keys of every inner door, but he could not them use, but kept them still in store. But very uncouth sight was to behold, how he did fashion his untoward pace. For as he forward moved his footing old, so backward still was turned his wrinkled face, unlike to men who ever as they trace both feet and face one way are wont to lead. This was the ancient keeper of that place, and foster father of the giant dead. His name Ignaro did his nature right areed. His reverend hairs and holy gravity the Knight much honoured as beseemed well, and gently asked where all the people be, which in that stately building wont to dwell. Who answered him full soft he could not tell. Again he asked, where that same Knight was laid, whom great Orgoglio with his puissance fell, had made his caitiff thrall. Again he said, he could not tell, nor ever other answer made. Then asked he, which way he in might pass. He could not tell, again he answered. Thereat the courteous knight displeased was, and said, Old Sire, it seems thou hast not read how ill it sits with that same silver head in vain to mock, or mocked in vain to be. But if thou be, as thou art portrayed, with nature's pen in age's grave degree, read in graver wise what I demand of thee. His answer likeness was, he could not tell, whose senseless speech and doted ignorance, when as the noble Prince had marked well, he guessed his nature by his countenance, and calmed his wrath with goodly temperance. Then to him stepping, from his arm did reach those keys, and made himself free enterance. Each door he opened without any breach, there was no bar to stop, nor foe him to impeach. There all within full rich arrayed he found with royal arras and resplendent gold, and did with store of everything abound, that great Princes presence might behold. But all the floor, too filthy to be told, with blood of guiltless babes and innocents true, which there were slain as sheep out of the fold, defiled was, that dreadful was to view, and sacred ashes over it was strowed new. And there beside of marble stone was built an altar, carved with cunning imagery, on which true Christians' blood was often spilt, and holy martyrs often doen to die with cruel malice and strong tyranny, whose blessed sprites from underneath the stone to God for vengeance cried continually, and with great grief were often heard to groan, that hardest heart would bleed to hear their piteous moan. Through every room he sought, and every bowre, but nowhere could he find that woeful thrall. At last he came unto an iron door that fast was locked, but key found not at all amongst that bunch, to open it withal. But in the same a little grate was pight, through which he sent his voice, and loud did call, with all his powre, to weet, if living wight were housed therein, whom he enlargen might. Therewith an hollow dreary murmuring voice these piteous plaints and dolours did resound. O who is that, which brings me happy choice of death, that here lie dying every stound, yet live perforce in balefull darkness bound? For now 3 moons have changed thrice their hue, and have been thrice hid underneath the ground, since I the heavens cheerefull face did view. O welcome thou, that dost of death bring tidings true. Which when that champion heard, with piercing point Of pity deare his heart was thrilled sore, And trembling horror ran through every joint, For ruth of gentle knight so foul forlore. Which shaking off, he rent that iron door With furious force, and indignation fell, Where entred in, his foot could find no floor, But all a deep descent as dark as hell, That breathed ever forth a filthy banefull smell. But neither darkness foul, nor filthy bands, Nor noyous smell his purpofe could withhold. Entire affection hateth nicer hands. But that with constant zeale and courage bold, After long paines and labours manifold, He found the meanes that prifoner up to reare, Whose feeble thighs, unable to uphold His pined courfe, him fcarce to light could beare, A ruefull spectacle of death and ghaftly dreare. His sad dull eyes, deep sunk in hollow pits, Could not endure th' unwonted Sunne to view. His bare thin cheekes, for want of better bits, And empty fides deceived of their view, Could make a stony heart his hap to rue. His raw-bone armes, whofe mighty brawnced bowes Were wont to rive steele plates and helmets hue, Were cleane confum'd, and all his vitall powres decayd, And all his flefh shrunk up like withered flowres. Whom when his Lady faw, to him fhe ran With hasty joy, to see him made her glad, And sad to view his visage pale and wan, Who erft in flowres of freshest youth was clad. Though when her well of teares fhe wasted had, She said, Ah dearest Lord, what evill ftar on you hath frowned, And pour'd this influence bad, that of yourfelf Ye thus berobbed are, and this mifeeming hue Your manly lookes doth marre. But welcome now, my Lord, in weal or woe, Whofe presence I have lackt too long a day, And fie on Fortune, mine avowed foe, Whofe wrathfull wreakes themfelves do now allay, And for thefe wrongs fhall treble penance pay Of treble good. Good growes of evils proof. The cheareleffe man, whom sorrow did difmay, Had no delight to treaten of his griefe, His long endured famine needed more reliefe. Faire Lady, then said that victorious knight, The things that grievous were to do or beare, Them to renew I wote, breeds no delight. Best musique breeds delight in lothing eare, But the only good that grows of passed feare, Is to be wise, and ware of like againe. This dayes ensample hath this lesson deare Deepe written in my heart with iron pen, That blisse may not abide in state of mortall men. Henceforth, Sir Knight, take to you wonted strength, And maister these mishaps with patient might. Lo where your foe lies stretcht in monftrous length, And lo that wicked woman in your sight, The root of all your care and wretched plight. Now in your powre to let her live or die. To do her die, quoth Una, were despight, And shame to avenge so weake an enemy. But spoile her of her scarlet robe, and let her fly. So as she bad, that which they disarrayd, And robed of royal robes, and purple pall, And ornaments that richly were difplayd. Nor spared they to strip her naked all, That when they had despoiled her tire and call, Such as she was, their eyes might her behold, That her misshapen parts did them appall. A loathly wrinkled hag, ill favoured, old, Whose secret filth good manners biddeth not be told. Her crafty head was altogether bold, And as in hate of honourable eld Was overgrown with scurf and filthy scald. Her teeth out of her rotten gums were feld, And her soure breath abominably smeld. Her dryed dugs, like bladders lacking wind, hung down, And filthy matter from them welled. Her rizzled skin as rough as maple rind, So scabby was, that would have loathed all womankind. Her nether parts, the shame of all her kind, My chafter Muse with shame doth blufh to write. But at her rump she growing had behind A foxes taile, with dung all fouly dight, And eke her feet her most monftrous were in fight. For one of them was like an eagles claw, With gripping talons arm'd to greedy flight. The other like a beares uneven paw, More ugly shape yet never living creature faw. Which when the knights beheld, amazed they were, And wondred at so foule deformed wight. Such then, said Una, as she feemeth here, Such is the face of falfhood, such the fight Of foule Duessa, when her borrowed light Is laid away, and counterfeisance known. Thus when they had the witch disrobed quite, And all her filthy feature open fhone, They let her go at will, and wander wayes unknown. She flying faft from heavens hated face, And from the world that her discovered wide, Fled to the wastefull wildernefle apace, From living eyes her open fhame to hide, And lurkt in rocks and caves long unespyde. But that faire crew of knights, and Una faire, Did in that caftle afterwards abide, To reft themfelves, and weary powers rare, Where ftore they found of all, that dainty was and rare. End of Canto 8, Book I. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross.